Nearly 10 years after Crystal Rogers was first reported missing in Bardstown, Kentucky, the 4th of July weekend of 2015, the first trial connected to this Bardstown murder mystery is now underway. The opening statements in Steve Lawson's trial happening just this afternoon. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us here on WHAS 11 Plus. I'm Doug Proffitt. Every night right throughout the trial, we're going to be right here with you, sharing an in-depth look at the day's proceedings. Plus, we have expert analysis from WHAS 11 legal analyst, Louisville attorney Nick Mudd. But first, Steve Lawson is the first of 3 men charged in the case to go to trial. He is charged with conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. He's not charged with murder in this case. Lawson's trial was moved to Bowling Green. That's in Warren County, Kentucky. And WHAS 11's Shay McAllister is there. And Shay, the day started right out of the gate with an attempt to actually delay this case.
Right, Doug. Not a huge surprise to anybody who's been following this. Steve Lawson's attorneys have asked for continuance in this case multiple times. They did so again this morning. So I have got 25 pages of notes I'm going to be referencing to make sure I'm giving you guys as close to exact quotes as I can. This is what Darren Wolf, Steve's attorney, had to say as soon as court was in session. As you know, we have asked to continue. We are going to let the court know we have worked diligently to prepare. We have done anything and everything we could. But we know we have not reviewed everything. We simply are not prepared. The judge did ask for some specifics here. He wanted to know, well, exactly what do you think you haven't seen? What are you worried about not seeing? They mentioned there's 400,000 pages of evidence. They haven't looked at all of it. Hundreds and hundreds of hours of interviews. They haven't listened to all of it. And when they were answering the judge's question on specifically, what is it that you're so worried about? They said there's issues with Nick Houck, there's issues with Brooks Houck, and we feel they're related. They also said we have not been able to review anything with the Jason Ellis case. This is the first time we're hearing Nick Houck mentioned, Jason Ellis mentioned in Steve Lawson's case at all, and by his own attorneys who are saying we think that there could be some connections here that we'd like some time to explore. Well, the judge said, quote, nobody has been able to solve Jason Ellis, and we don't think we're going to solve it at this trial. Motion denied. And with that, we were straight on into jury selection. He gave it no more thought. Doug, I know that this is something everyone knew was going to happen. They were going to ask for a continuance. And then, again, everyone was expecting the judge to deny it, which he did.
Well, Shay, that is fascinating what you just said there about Nick Houck certainly bringing his name into this really right out of the beginning there, trying to connect the other unsolved cases. Is that what you feel was sort of going on there, or why did this come out of the blue?
We'd have no idea because they didn't dive into it at all. All they said is we think that there's evidence that has to do with issues on Nick and Brooks on this case. We want to look at the Jason Ellis case, but we haven't had a chance to do that. We need more time to do it. And the judge just shut it down immediately. He didn't entertain it. They didn't go into any more detail, but it was kind of their last-ditch effort, the defense's last-ditch effort to reach for something to convince the judge to let them have more time.
Shay, let's talk about the jury selection here because, of course, you have 12 jurors, but 3 alternates in this case, total of 15. What's the breakdown of the jury members that you actually saw in front of you today? We might add you're taking such great notes because the judge has banned cameras in the courtroom, and so we won't be seeing video out of that courtroom.
Right, exactly. This is all we have for a record of what happened in the courtroom today. So the makeup is 15 people. We have 10 women, 5 men, and like you mentioned, only 12 of them will ultimately be involved in that final decision at the end of the week. All of them did confirm that they could stay through the end of the week, which is how long they think this trial is going to last, possibly until Monday. And I think incredibly, that's due to just how quick jury selection actually went this morning. So jury selection was underway at 9:20, according to my notes. And by lunchtime at noon, a jury was seated in this case. We had expected that this could take days, if not a week. When last time I talked to Nick, we talked about that. Would it even be possible for them to find a jury here? The answer to that, we learned, is yes. And they did that by acknowledging right off the bat that just because you've heard about the Crystal Rogers case does not mean that you can't be a juror. They asked some really specific questions about this. They said, raise your hand if you've heard of the case Almost everyone raised their hand. I think 10 people out of the dozens that were in the room did not raise their hand. Then they said, okay, keep your hand raised if you know some specifics about it, but you don't have an opinion. And then they said, keep your hand raised if you know specifics and you have an opinion. 7 people had their hands raised. They were at the end. Those 7 were dismissed for having an opinion. But Doug, most of the people in the room had heard about it, but said they could put that aside. They could just focus on the evidence that they heard today to make their decisions, which is an important part of trial. They also wanted to know if any of the members of the jury knew any of the potential witnesses. So we learned in jury selection who we might be hearing from in the case. That was the detective John Snow, who already testified today. Sherry Ballard, Crystal's mom, already testified today. Brian Luckett, he's a Kentucky State Police detective who has not testified yet, so he may be coming. The defense listed off a number of people. None of them were familiar names to me, but one of them did have a conflict with a jury member, so he was dismissed. The defense was also incredibly focused on police connections. They wanted to make sure if anybody knew police officers, had family members who were police officers, that they were open to the idea that just because a police officer says something does not make it fact. That was really important to the defense. And they were drilling it in. They were drilling into their head too that they were not here to decide if Crystal Rogers was murdered. They were here to decide if Steve Lawson was part of a conspiracy to kill her, if he agreed to move her car, if he knew that something bad might happen to her or had happened to her, and then if he actually went through with it.
That firewall they put out there, you're right, that distinction was fascinating also at the beginning. So Shay McAllister, of course, cover every twist of this case for many, many years, going to be on this trial and then the next one. Shay, we're going to get right back to you in just a second, but first we want to switch to WHAS 11 News legal analyst Nick Mudd of the Mudd Law Group. He's been with us for more than a year now talking about this case, following it closely. A lot to cover there. I first want to bring up this information that we just heard Shay say, bringing in Nick Houck, the brother, who's of course a former Bardstown police officer, and Brooks Houck, saying there could be. Are we going to be in for some bombshells in this case, Nick, or is you follow attorneys closely? Is this some strategy?
Well, the issue is 400,000 pages of discovery. Imagine reading a 400,000-page novel, Doug.
I wouldn't want to do it.
It's almost impossible. You couldn't finish it in a year, a couple years. I mean, who knows how long it would take. And so the problem that I see with the case potentially going forward, even if the prosecution gets a conviction, on appeal, the Court of Appeals may look at this and say, look, these attorneys should have had more time to prepare. This is way too fast. The judge pushed this case too hard to trial, and they should have been given a significant amount of time to at least review all of that, plus the hundreds of hours of interviews.
But that didn't happen. The judge has moved the case forward. So you heard some of the key evidence come out today. Right. He's been following our WHAS 11 blog, by the way, on our website, WHAS11.com. That information being provided by Shay McAllister and Joseph Garcia with our web team, giving you excellent updates when they can. When she can come out of the courtroom, she posts it. The evidence you have been focused on is the cell phone data connections of Steve Lawson next to Crystal Rogers' car there alongside the Bluegrass Parkway where the engine was still running. The cell phone was there, turned off. Why is that so important to you?
Well, we all carry cell phones. They put us at a specific time, place, location, and even the prosecutor, Shane Young, said in an opening statement that cell phone and GPS data is going to be crucial to this case. And I think, it's going to put Steve Lawson at the scene, and it'll tell a tale for us where he was at a specific time, when he left, his interactions with Brooks Houck. Those things of that nature are going to be key here to getting an eviction. I've been saying it all along. You and I have discussed it. The GPS and cell phone tower data is going to be crucial to getting a conviction against him for that conspiracy charge.
Why was it so important to tell these jurors right off the bat? You can't think of murder and the murder of Crystal Rogers when Steve Lawson's really faced with questions about whether he knew about the murder. That's part of his charges.
Right. Certainly, I think the defense and the prosecution both hit on that and kind of tried to differentiate somewhat. But certainly, they're not there to see if he is the person who actually committed the act. And I think the defense lawyer, Mr. Wolf, wanted to make that clear to the jury. Look, he's not here charged with killing someone. That's not why we're here. This has to do with any sort of plan and preparation and if he knew what was going to happen to Crystal Rogers.
Do you think Steve Lawson gets a conviction in this case, or does he get off?
Well, Mr. Wolf conceded an opening statement, conceded the tampering physical evidence. There's a saying that we have in law, which is admit what you can't afford to deny, deny what you can't afford to admit.
Why did he admit that Lawson is guilty of that?
Well, strategically, Lawson has been in custody for approximately a year now, give or take, a little bit of time. Tampering is just a Class D felony. That's 1 to 5 years. This conspiracy charge, we're talking 10 to 20 years. So let's say, hypothetically, Lawson walks on the conspiracy charge but gets convicted of tampering. He's immediately parole eligible in that case, potentially get released immediately. Or if the jury didn't give him that much time, maybe a year or two, he could be served out almost immediately and get released. So strategically, I think Mr. Wolf wanted to build credibility with the jurors. And, it's pretty clear based on Lawson's statements, et cetera, and probably going to be clear from the cell phone data that he did had something to do with moving the car and leaving the car on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway. However, I think he wanted to build credibility with them and say, look, we admit that. We don't have a problem with that. But what we are denying is this serious conspiracy charge, which is a 10 to 20-year prison sentence.
We just heard Shay report the list of the witnesses coming along. A lot of police folks were going to be coming along the way, but the jurors were questioned about police connections. She said they seem to be very concerned in their questioning about that. Why?
It's common for both prosecutors and defense lawyers to ask those questions, primarily because we want to know, is your brother or sister or cousin or husband or wife in law enforcement? Because most people, if you're connected to law enforcement, you tend to typically believe the police officer. And a juror has to give every single witness an equal playing field when they start. Now, that can change as they testify, obviously, but you can't say, hey, I have a family full of police officers. I believe police officers more than I would a lay person. If you do that, you're going to be struck as a juror. Okay, we're going to come back to Nick in just a second. But first, of course, it's been a fast-moving day here for day one of Steve Lawson's conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence trial. We want to head back to Shay in Bowling Green, who was there for the opening statements. And Shay, what guidelines did they give the jury about their job in this case? I mean, you just talked about one of them. I'm curious about those opening statements that you heard today.
Sure. Well, Doug, as a reporter in a courtroom, opening statements are everything because it basically lays out the roadmap to the trial, right? It tells us exactly who are they going to be calling, what are they going to be explaining, the high points that they want jurors to really pay attention to. We love opening statements, so I'll spell those out for you. As far as juror instructions, they're really simple. They said, listen to the evidence, take notes if you want to, don't talk to anybody about this, don't watch any news on this, do not Google Crystal Rogers, just report for jury duty, listen to what we tell you, and at the end, make a decision. That was what the juror was instructed to do. So here's some of the things they heard in opening statements. This was from the prosecutor, Shane Young. He spelled out how we would see photos of Crystal's car on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway exactly as it was left, which we had never seen before until today. We actually saw her keys in the ignition, her purse and her cell phone sitting on the passenger seat. We saw a skid mark behind the car, which they said was caused from a flat tire that would force them to pull over on the side of the vehicle. We saw the seat that was pulled up closer to the steering wheel. Steve Lawson's attorneys say that he admits to doing that. He was the one who moved the seat. And so a lot more details about the car that we had never heard before. We also talked about and heard about that 3-second phone call with Brooks Hauk. It came up during one of the first police interrogations during this case. Brooks called Steve and said, hey, I called you a few days ago. What did we talk about? And Steve said, oh, we were talking about rental properties. Well, now the prosecutor saying that was all a story, it was a cover-up. What that phone call was actually about was to say that the job was done, and that job was a plan to murder Crystal. So the defendant said that Brooks had asked him, will you get rid of Crystal? I want you to get rid of Crystal. And that Steve Lawson said, no, I won't do that. I don't want to be part of killing anyone, but I will move her car. And that he went ahead and did that. And like Nick said, they admitted to that. The defense in their opening statement said, yes, that they did that. Doug, this stood out to me, and I had it highlighted on here. I've been talking about it all day. Shane Young called that night, the night that Crystal went missing. He said Crystal took a fatal ride to the farm, and he's talking about the Houck family farm on Pascal Ballard Lane, the farm where so much time has been spent searching. There's been so many conspiracies about what happened there. Him bringing that up in the opening statements leads me to believe we're going to get a lot more details about what they think happened at the farm that night. Crystal took a fatal ride to the farm. They say after 9 p.m., Crystal was never heard from again on that night. And that was what the prosecutor had to say. On the other hand, defense attorneys also get to give their opening statements. They spent their entire time just discrediting the prosecution's case, saying there's many things that were stated by the prosecutor that you will not see evidence for. There's no proof of conspiracy to commit murder. This is all a narrative. This is a series of individuals that are going to attempt to be heroes. They want to be the people who solve the greatest mystery in the history of Kentucky. So the defense really creating this this room for questioning, this room for does the prosecution really have that? They say no, but they do admit that Steve Lawson drove to mile marker 14 on the Bluegrass Parkway. His son asked him to pick him up there. Before he left, he moved the seat in Crystal's car, and then he took his son away from that spot. So that's what we heard in opening statements. Very interesting, and I'm excited to hear more in this case. I think we might hear some details about that night that Crystal was killed, according to police, that we've never heard before.
Just that line you said there, fatal ride to the farm, says so much, especially after we watched the FBI camp out and work on these properties for so many years, Shay, and not really knowing what they were able to find, the evidence on the way. Well, then the testimony got underway real quickly today. What about the first testimony? Who was first on the stand? What did they have to say?
Sure. So Sherry Ballard, Crystal Rogers' mom, was first to testify today. As soon as she took a seat, she had a tissue in her hand, and she was softly crying in the witness box. She was struggling even to introduce herself to the jurors, just so overcome by emotion. And Doug, I talked to her before a trial got started, and she told me she knew she would be. She knew that this would be difficult. She knew that having to recall the final days with her daughter, those first days of searching for her, and the realization that she might be gone forever was going to be incredibly painful for her, and it appeared that it was just that. She talked about the final text that she had sent to Crystal saying, "Everyone is worried about you. You need to respond to your children." She actually read them to the jury, exactly what she had wrote. She talked about going to the sheriff's office to report Crystal missing. It had been at that point 2 days since anybody had seen her or heard from her. And on the way, she sees Brooks Houck. She actually flags him down. They pull over to a gas station, and she goes up and talks to him. And for the first time, we saw surveillance video of this interaction. We saw Brooks Houck pulls into a gas station, Sherry Ballard pulls in, and Sherry goes up to the passenger side of the car and actually has a full conversation with him. And we couldn't hear anything, but she was filling in the blanks for him. She said, "I told him I'm going to file a missing persons report. He looked at me like I was talking to a person off the street. He said, 'I think that's what you should do.' And then he drove away. He did not go with her. He did not help search for her." Sherry said that they would never hear from Crystal again. They would never find any sign of Crystal. In her mind, she knew right then that Crystal was gone forever.
So many pieces of this puzzle coming together as you're vividly describing it there, like that surveillance video. So Shay, as we wrap up here, they still expect this trial to maybe even possibly end by sometime on Friday?
Pretty incredible, right? That we got started on Tuesday morning with a motion to delay, and yeah, there is a belief here that we could be done on Friday. That's the goal. I think at the speed we're moving right now, it's a safe goal. The hope is that if the prosecutor wraps on Thursday, defense said that they could wrap on Friday and they could send the jury off into deliberations on Friday evening. They do not want to call them back on Monday just to deliberate. They say that that is a last resort, but they will if they have to. Everybody in this jury pool has agreed to come back on Monday if they need to.
Okay, Shay will be with us here every night, breaking down a full day in the courtroom. Again, no cameras allowed in the courtroom. That's why you're seeing sketches and Shay's great notes. Thank you very much, Shay. And Nick Mudd's been listening in here on with Shay as we have been talking about this and breaking it down with our WHAS 11 News legal analyst. So, Nick, never before seen evidence revealed in the courtroom today, so fast out of the gate. And then that key line, the fatal ride to the farm.
Right. Once again, you know where I'm going to think about this and going, cell phone records now of Crystal Rogers. We know her cell phone was found in the car on the side of the road of Bluegrass Parkway. We know that Mr. Lawson helped put that car there. That phone was found in there, but it was turned off. A question would be now, what do her cell phone records show? Where was that phone turned off? What was the last tower that it hit from, and what time did it hit? And I'm wondering if those things, if they don't come out here, they will come out in the trial of Brooks Houck.
To your credit, you've been bringing this up for maybe a year here on WHAS. You believe that that evidence will be irrefutable, or is it just going to fill in another piece of a puzzle that we still have fuzzy information about?
The fact the phone, we know she had a phone. We know the phone typically would be on her, and like it is all of us, I think it's the type of stuff that's very difficult to refute. Cell phone towers keep track of where we are at all times. There's a historical pattern of where you have been if your phone is with you. You can see who you called, when you called them, when the phone was turned on and off. And I think that it's going to be key here to getting a conviction, and it may be key to convicting Mr. Lawson of the conspiracy to commit murder.
Well, all of Bardstown's going to be a buzz that they even brought up Nick Houck's name, who is not charged, and he's not involved in this case. Let's cover some of the obvious questions, though, that still remain 10 years later. We don't know the why, the motive of why Crystal Rogers was killed.
We do not.
Do you think that'll come out in this?
I do not think so. I think it's possible, but you know, every prosecutor in a homicide case generally will start out saying if they don't have a motive, hey, we don't have to prove a motive. We only have to prove the elements of the case to you. You may want a motive, you may ask for a motive, but that's not what we have to prove. What we have to prove is at the very end of the case when the judge instructs you on the law, those elements are what we have to prove. You know, you would think by now we would have a motive. We don't. We don't have a body. We don't have a cause of death. And, you know, certainly Mr. Wolf is right. There's a lot of unanswered questions here.
So let's go back to no remains at all, no inkling of where the body could be. Do you have to have that for a conviction? I'm not talking just Steve Lawson, but as we come to June 24th, which is the beginning of the Brooks Houck Joseph Lawson trial, do you have to have that in that case?
It certainly helps, but no, you don't have to have it. You know, you can build what's called a circumstantial case. Certainly, everybody wants to have, as a prosecutor, physical evidence to show you know, kind of the remains of someone, the cause of death, etc. However, it is not required. Juries like to see it. Prosecutors want it. Detectives want it. But it's not required. But it does make getting a conviction against, at least against Mr. Houck, substantially more difficult come June. Tomorrow
becomes day 2. What are you expecting these attorneys to throw at? Because this morning you were texting me saying, hey, I know what this attorney is going to do this morning. He's going to try to get a delay.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. How does this start out tomorrow?
I assume there'll probably be a lot of police witnesses tomorrow. You know, a lot of people describing the scene as they found the car, things of that nature. At some point we'll turn, I assume, to have an expert in the cell phones that will testify for the prosecution. But I don't know what that will be or when it will be, but I do anticipate a lot of law enforcement testifying tomorrow.
So you expect that Steve Lawson, if he gets convicted on the one count at least, how many years in prison would that be?
So that's tampering with physical evidence. It's a Class D felony, the lowest level in Kentucky. It's 1 to 5 years in prison.
And is this a case of harbinger of what's to come for the next case, or are we talking a completely different makeup because a murder charge is involved in the next case against Brooks Houck?
I think we're going to get a slice of the pie, but we're not going to get the whole thing.
Do you think his brother is called to testify in the next trial?
That is a great question, and if it does happen, it's certainly possible that he could plead the fifth.
We've seen cold cases like this come to fruition many, many years down the line. Does the fact that it's going to be 10 years coming up this 4th of July weekend, does that distance make it much more difficult here?
It does. I've tried cold cases as a prosecutor. It makes it much more difficult for them. People don't remember things, and certainly if they didn't document it at the time, That's why police officers write reports. That's why crime scene unit technicians write reports. It's because they do so many cases. A decade later, they can't remember exactly what they did. And so certainly it does make it more difficult for the prosecution. But let's hope that, everybody did their job, they documented what they were supposed to do, and ultimately truth will come out one way or the other.
And of course, Steve Lawson's testimony has been sketchy at best on the trustworthy side. Right. It's changed the story of a lot and his credibility there. Right. Okay, Nick Mudd, our WHAS 11 legal analyst, is going to be joining us here every night on this broadcast. Now, for nearly 10 years, the mystery surrounding Crystal Rogers' disappearance has gripped the Bardstown community. Now, many people are hopeful that they'll receive answers finally. Alexander Goldberg and senior photojournalist Alyssa Newton have been talking with people in Bardstown about the start of the trial.
No doubt about it, it is on everybody's mind.
Bardstown, a place well-traveled for its bourbon and well-known for the high-profile case of Crystal Rogers.
We kind of want some justice, and so we can go back to the little beautiful hometown that we are, and without having this kind of a dark cloud around us.
Bardstown native Tom Hayes has been following the case since the mom of 5 disappeared a decade ago. Tuesday, jury selection and day 1 in the criminal trial of Steve Lawson. Lawson was charged with conspiracy to murder and tampering with physical evidence in Rogers' death.
The biggest question would be, where is the body?
Hayes wanting whoever did it to fess up.
So they could, pay the respects and bury their loved one.
And like Hayes,
probably also to the why.
Charles Lemons has the same questions.
Why? Why did they do it? And where's the body?
The Bardstown resident says the wheels of justice are turning too slowly.
They've been stringing us along for a year now with this, oh, we've got him, and then nothing.
Rarely did Rogers' name come up without a mention of other unsolved cases in Nelson County, like Bardstown police officer Jason Ellis, who was shot dead in an ambush attack in 2013.
Actually, I think most people feel a bit of fatigue because, let's face it, Ellis still hasn't seen the light of day. They've not accused anybody of it. They haven't found anything.
The unsolved cases weighing heavy on the people of Bardstown who just want answers, made apparent by the signs and the billboards that have served as a reminder for the last decade.
The only thing you might look forward to is taking down all the signs that have been up for 10 years.
And with that, the trial resumes tomorrow, Wednesday at 9 a.m. Bowling Green will, of course, have coverage throughout the day on WHAS 11. And I invite you to follow our excellent blog on WHAS11.com, our website, giving you reports from Shay McAllister when she can get out of the courtroom and give the latest information. And then we're going to be back here at 9:30 and 11:30 p.m. on the free WHAS 11 Plus app for a closer look at the day's proceedings. Thank you for joining us.